Hello, everybody. Welcome to Sunday Night Ghost Stories on a Sunday, as nature intended. Here we are in the library. We've got the lights on. We've got the fire on for effect. Derp is on the windowsill over there. We've got books. We've got beer. Good times, everybody. Good times. So let's just go to visual effects and let's just having a look to see if we can have the blur on. Yes, there we go. We'll have the blur on. That's good enough. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. There we go. That's better. What are we reading? We are reading tonight Ghost Stations 3, which is we are cherry picking our way through that because unfortunately Bruce Barrymore Halpenny on the later books, because he lacks an editor, some of his stories are quite heavy going. So we are going to be kind of picking our way through them, and it's going to be edited highlights. Actually, we're going to turn the blur off because it's messing around with the signal. What are we drinking tonight? Two beer strategy. So we've got Lager Local by Morenos. Morenos.com, brewed and canned in Cerveceria, Morenos in the UK. Ingredients: water, malted barley, hops, yeast, allergens including gluten shown in bold. Drink responsibly. Doesn't tell us anything more about it. Just that's it. It is apparently a lager. I'm not really a lagery person, but 3.8%. So that would be the first part of tonight's alcohol-induced nonsense. What do you know? We haven't even read a story yet, and we've already got a dead soldier. And run VT.
Oh, it's jolly nice of you. Hello, dead soldier. Seen plenty of those in my time.
Marvellous film. And we will be washing it down with the Balmure from Lidl, which is gorgeous stuff. Right. And we have snacks for half time. Exciting times, Derp. Derp is nodding there for a moment. Let's just put the light on a bit more. Right. Chapter 2, because chapter 1's boring. Chapter 2, Spirit of the Air Hero Ghost. RAF Lakenheath can lay claim to ghosts, UFOs, and a mystery that has never been solved. I did mention Lakenheath Charlie, who has instilled fear into many on the airfield in my book, ARG, Ghost Stations 2. But since then, I've received much more information, haunting information that can solve the mystery of who is haunting the airfield. But let us look first into the history of the airfield. Airfield twice there, Bruce, never mind. Construction of Royal Air Force Lakenheath began in 1941 on some 2,000 acres of the Elvedon estate of Lord Ivarg, and during the war years housed numbers 149 and 199 bomber squadrons, 199 bomber squadrons, full stop. Bomber Command flew 2,248 operational sorties from Royal Air Force Lakenheath, with a loss of 85 aircraft. In 1948, the United States Air Force began to use the airfield for units of Strategic Air Command. The Americans took over completely in 1951. The airfield became the home of the 48th Tactical Fighter Wing, and in 1977 they converted to the highly sophisticated supersonic F-111 fighter bomber aircraft, which provides long-range, all-weather, day or night nuclear and conventional air-to-surface capability. RAF Lakenheath is the largest F-111 base, with around 5,000 military personnel and 7,000 family members, plus a ghost or two. Many of the ghostly sightings have been in and around the Tab V46 shelter, but also around the ammo dump. Many people have reported eerie and strange happenings. Many have had footprints suddenly appear before their eyes. The security police themselves have witnessed the ghostly footprints. It is a very unnerving experience to see footprints suddenly appear in front of you, yet no one is there to make them, said one airman. Red section is the devil section, for this is where the haunted Tab V46 shelter is located. Red 5 mobile unit consisted of 3 security policemen which patrolled the wooded area near the main A1065 Brandon Road. They had parked behind the Tab V46 shelter and set out on their foot patrol. We had just completed our patrol and got into our vehicle when suddenly we saw a red light at the back of us. I looked around to see a man standing a few meters away, but it wasn't a man. It was a sort of ghostly figure. We all felt scared and got out of there fast, said the sergeant. That was just one of dozens of sightings of a ghostly figure. I was on patrol in the wooded area near the A1065 road when out of nowhere appears a ghostly figure. I just stared, unable to move. It moved without touching the ground. You could see it was a man, but didn't seem real. Suddenly it vanished. I reported the incident to Central Security Control, but nothing was heard about it. It was Lakenheath Charlie, I was told, said the security police sergeant. For security reasons, the Tab V46 shelter has been checked from top to bottom, but nothing has been found that can account for the strange happenings. The beer yawns, and I haven't even had a beer yet. It's an eerie place to work in, said one of the maintenance people. Tools just disappear, and the sound of organ music keeps filling the air. All is normal. Then suddenly you can hear this organ music. Over the years, the notorious Tab V46 has built up quite a reputation as the most haunted place on the airfield. One night, a security patrol had just checked the aircraft shelter's doors, and even though securely locked, they swear they heard someone moving about inside. Another incident was when an airman was working one night at the far end of the runway near the 495th Tactical Fighter Squadron, when suddenly someone or something started throwing stones at him. He quickly called Central Security Patrol. When we arrived at the scene, we turned off our headlights so that we could sneak up on this intruder. All of a sudden, we came under fire from a hail of rocks. We quickly turned all the headlight and searchlights on, but couldn't see anyone. It seemed like the rocks were coming at us from nowhere. We got out fast, said the sergeant. Try a bit of this. And he said, cider, lager, Slangsby bar. That's actually quite sweet. That's quite quaffable, actually. So, was this also Lakenheath Charlie? It is all very mysterious. Does Royal Air Force Lakenheath have more than one ghost? Many strange things have happened. Legend has it that a bomber crashed near the Tab V46 hangar during the Second World War, and all but the pilot's body were recovered. Allegedly, it is the ghost of the bomber pilot who is haunting the airfield. Do apologise. He is the restless spirit who has made it impossible for many to venture out alone at night. And he could be camera shy, for when Sergeant Dave Malakoff went to photograph the Tab V46 shelter, the camera would not work. Yet it had been tested in the photo lab before going out. Nothing was mechanically wrong with the camera. Very strange, very eerie, and very mysterious. Yes, it is the ghost of a bomber pilot, but not the one which crashed near the airfield. After extensive research, I found that RAF Lakenheath is in fact haunted by the ghost of a wartime hero, Flight Sergeant Rawdon Hume Middleton, Royal Australian Air Force, who, for his outstanding gallantry, was posthumously awarded the Victoria Cross, Bruce. Middleton was captain of a Sterling bomber of No. 149 Squadron, Royal Air Force, detailed to attack the Fiat works at Turin in Italy on the night of the 28th to 29th of November 1942. On the way to target, Middleton's aircraft had great difficulty in climbing to 12,000 feet to cross the Alps. He was forced to use excess petrol, which barely left enough for the return flight. But Middleton was determined to continue to target, which was by now clearly illuminated by flares. And as soon as he reached Turin, he dived to 2,000 feet and made 3 deliberate runs over the city, facing intense fire from anti-aircraft fire in the process. But on the 3rd run, the Sterling bomber was hit and a large hole appeared in the port mainplane. The bomber became difficult to handle. Next second, the shell burst in the cockpit and a piece of shell splinter tore into the side of Middleton's face, destroying his right eye and exposing the bone over his left eye. He was also hit in the legs and body. The second pilot also received head and leg wounds, which bled profusely. To add to their problems, the windscreen had shattered and the bomber was almost out of control, dropping to 800 feet before the second pilot could get it back under control and release the bombs. While this was being played out, Middleton remained slumped unconscious, blood gushing from his many wounds. As the crippled bomber, still under intense fire, limped out of the target area, Middleton regained consciousness and ordered the second pilot back to the rest station to receive first aid. The rear turret had been put out of action and the bomber was very difficult to fly. Because of his severe wounds, Middleton could see very little and could not speak without loss of blood and great pain. Middleton set course for base. It had been discussed to abandon the crippled bomber, but the captain expressed his wish to reach the English coast so that his crew could parachute to safety. He knew that his wounds and diminishing strength would not permit him to escape unless he did so immediately. For 4 hours, at a height of only 6,000 feet, the battle-scarred Sterling staggered northwards. It was a long way behind the main bomber stream. Middleton seemed oblivious to the pain. Crossing the French coast, the bomber was hit again by intense light anti-aircraft fire, but determined to get home. Middleton mustered unbelievable strength to take evasive action. By now, the dying bomber roared out over the dark, oily water of the English Channel, spluttering and calling out as if warning its valiant crew it could do no more. Just in time, the English Channel came into view. With petrol for only 5 minutes flying remaining, Middleton ordered his crew to bail out while he flew parallel to the shore and then intended to head out to sea. 5 of the crew bailed out and landed in England, but the front gunner and flight engineer, who had stayed to assist their gallant captain for as long as possible, jumped too late and were both drowned. Middleton remained at the controls and at approximately 3:10 a.m. on the morning of the 29th of November, the badly crippled Sterling bomber crashed in the English Channel. It is interesting to note that from the 228 bombers dispatched, 192 attacked Turin and only Middleton's bomber was lost. He was born at Waverley, New South Wales, and was a great-nephew of the early Australian explorer Hamilton Hume. Middleton's body was washed ashore at Shakespeare Beach, Dover, on the 1st of February 1943, and was buried with full military honours in the churchyard at Beck Row near Mildenhall. I think we want to have a quick swig of the old lager. Lager? What's wrong with you, man? But was it the body of Flight Sergeant Middleton? Very doubtful. So who, if anyone, was buried in the churchyard and lies under Middleton's headstone? An airman who was on the burial details said it was not the body of Flight Sergeant Middleton. So who was it? Who or what lies buried in the churchyard? So could it be the ghost of Flight Sergeant Middleton looking for his other crew members? His last wish was to return to RAF Lakenheath. RAF Lakenheath, exclamation mark, lowercase and it is strange that the ghost is always seen around the end of November. If that is true, it is a wartime hero that haunts the airfield. Is the ghost looking for the other crew or trying to solve the mystery of who is buried in the churchyard? A very ghostly mystery. But the biggest mystery, which still remains unsolved even to this day, is the night RAF Lakenheath had a visit from outer space, or was it supernatural forces? On the 13th of August 1956, two Royal Air Force ground station radar. On the 13th of August 1956, two Royal Air Force ground radar stations detected several mysterious objects moving at high speed on a clear moonlit night. The first radar station tracked an unidentified object at 4,000 feet altitude moving westward at around 3,000 miles per hour. Simultaneously, control tower operations at Royal Air Force Lakenheath reported a bright light passing overhead toward the west, and a pilot of an aircraft at 4,000 feet saw the aircraft at 4,000 feet over the airfield saw the bright light streak westward under his aircraft. The second radar station, alerted by the first, detected a stationary object at about 20,000 feet altitude that suddenly went north at a speed of around 600 miles per hour. This mysterious object made several sudden stops and turns, as if trying to avoid an adversary. Meanwhile, a Royal Air Force fighter had been alerted and was airborne. It made airborne radar contacts with the object over Ely, just west of RAF Lakenheath. Suddenly, the object moved around behind the fighter aircraft, at all times being both tracked by ground radar. At all times, both being tracked by ground radar. The fighter pilot could not shake the mysterious object, and a second fighter aircraft was scrambled, but it never made contact, and all radar contacts were then lost. This eerie episode was played out from 11 p.m. to 3:30 a.m., and several other radar targets were tracked in the same area, and several other small moving lights were seen, but all disappeared at 3:30 a.m. This is one of the best established and most puzzling of all the unexplained UFO cases. Let us remember, these strange objects were identified by radar. This measures the distance of a UFO and the direction which may be affected by refraction of the radio beam in the atmosphere. Several effects can give false radar echoes: electronic interference, reflections from ionized layers or clouds, and reflections from regions of higher temperature or humidity, as in a cumulus cloud. Thus, radar sightings, while more reliable in certain respects, fail to discriminate between physical objects and meteor trails, tracks of ionized gas, rain, or thermal discontinuities. A simultaneous radar detection and visual sighting in the same direction is the most reliable, but not certain, evidence of a physical object. The absence of a given explanation, as in this case, does not mean the evidence favors the extraterrestrial hypothesis. It merely means that no explanation is known. RAF Lakenheath was only about 5 kilometers as the crow flies from my top secret atom station. On that particular night, we did get a red alert, but no one at my station saw the mysterious object or reported anything unusual. Was it just for RAF Lakenheath? Had it anything to do with the spirit of the air hero ghost? I think that does get a thunderclap. 21 minutes. Slange me var. Derpy is stretched out on the windowsill there, probably because it's a little bit cooler tonight. So, and we are going to have some of the Balmuir. So, oh, lovely. I've just suddenly realised we haven't got our filter on tonight. So, visual effects. What was the filter we liked? It was it vintage or was it warm? It was warm. That's the one. I wonder why I looked a bit cold. Right. Chapter 3. Ground control to Ghost Squadron. I was in the switchboard room when I saw a figure glide past the door, said Brenda Jenkinson, Assistant Air Traffic Controller. It was a man about 6 feet tall. It moved slowly towards the approach room and then disappeared. Nobody else was about, so I just screamed, "I've seen a ghost!" Everyone thought I'd gone mad. Brenda Jenkinson, 21-year-old from Oldham, was on night duty when she saw the uniformed phantom appear in the control tower at Royal Air Force Linton-on-Ouse, near York. RAF Linton-on-Ouse has had a long and checkered career. It opened on the 13th of May 1937, and the first squadrons to arrive were numbers 51 and 58, which were equipped with Armstrong Whitworth Whitley bombers. The two squadrons played a prominent part in the early night bombing offensive. The station also housed number 102 Squadron and, during a raid on the railway marshalling yards at Cologne, Whitley 5 P5005 N for Nuts, piloted by Pilot Officer G.L. Cheshire, later Group Captain Cheshire, VC, Group Captain Leonard Cheshire, was hit over the target area. Fire raged in the fuselage, but remaining calm, Cheshire brought the crippled bomber under control and, with the fire extinguished, landed back at Linton-on-Ouse after being in the air for 8.5 hours. In December 1940, number 35 Squadron arrived with their heavy 4-engined Halifax bombers, and there were many crashes in those early days. Halifax L9487 was on a measured climb and consumption test on the 13th of January 1941 when an engine caught fire at 12,000 feet. The pilot lost control and the bomber crashed at 11:55 hours near Baldersea, St. James, just north of Dishford. The crew of 6 were killed. Rumours now began to spread that it was an unlucky airfield with opening on the 13th. It was the 13th that Cheshire was hit, and another crash on the 13th of January 1941. But it was not just the 13th. July 1942 proved to be a very bad month. On the 14th, Halifax W7761 returned from operations with a hung-up 4,000-pounder on board. The pilot, Sergeant H.B. MacDonald, who had survived a crash in Halifax W1159 on the 22nd of June, decided to abandon the deadly bomber, and this was carried out successfully over Knaresborough, Yorkshire. The crewless bomber flew on westwards before running out of fuel and crashing. But the Gremlins, or the Phantom crew member, was on board, for it is interesting to note that about 2 seconds before the crash, the aircraft released the 4,000-pound bomb of its own accord. The bomb fell a few hundred yards from a farmhouse and blew all the windows out. There is a crater there. There is a crater still there today. The same day, Halifax W1154 crashed after engine failure. The pilot, Flight Sergeant Casey, and one other crew member were killed. Then, on the 21st of July, Halifax R9489 crashed during an air test. The pilot, Sergeant T.C. Murray, had taken 2 Army NCOs for a flight contrary to orders, and all 9 occupants were killed when the bomber crashed and burnt at Catterton near Tadcaster, Yorkshire. I think we've got to have another quick swig of the old. We're up to 27 minutes, yeah. In June 1943, Linton-on-Ouse became a Canadian base and housed number 426 Thunderbird Squadron and number 408 Goose Squadron, both equipped with Halifax bombers. The Canadians took off night after night on their mission of death. Their doom-laden bombers struggled valiantly to gain height over the Yorkshire countryside, but not all were successful. Their luck had run out. On the 5th of March 1945, number 426 Squadron dispatched 14 Handley Page Halifax Mark 7s, but freezing fog in the Vale of York claimed LW-219 Y for Yoke, piloted by Flight Lieutenant T. Emerson. Under its full bomb and fuel load for the long trip across Germany, it struggled to gain height, but as the flying surfaces iced up, this added weight was just too much, and at 1500 hours, just 21 minutes after takeoff, Y for Yoke fell out of the sky, partially disintegrating in the process. The fuselage fell into Nunthorpe Grove, York, and an engine plummeted into the kitchen of the Nunthorpe Secondary School. The wireless operator / air gunner, Pilot Officer J. Lowe, bailed out of the disintegrating aircraft, only he was too low and his parachute failed to deploy properly. However, the resulting explosion from the crashing bomber blew him up into the air sufficiently to allow his parachute to deploy, decelerating his fall. He landed heavily on the shed roof, seriously injured. All other crew members were killed. Also, 5 civilians were killed and a further 18 injured. The same freezing fog also caused the crash of Halifax NP 793 of number 426 Squadron. Sergeant H.S. Watts took off at 1700 hours and tried to get above the freezing fog, but after circling, he lost control due to severe icing and at 1745 hours crashed 1 mile south of Hutton Le Hole near Kirby Moorside, Yorkshire. The bomber burnt on impact, killing the crew of 7. Traces of the aircraft are still where they fell that March night in 1945. A quick swig of the old lager. And we just bumped through the half-hour mark, so Slange. Number 408 Goose Squadron flew 4,610 sorties, from which its casualties were 146 aircraft and 897 aircrew, of whom 877 were killed, missing, or prisoners, Bruce, plural. The Thunderbirds sent out 3,233 aircraft, and its losses totaled 88 aircraft, from which 425 aircrew were killed. Royal Air Force Linton-on-Ouse continued after the war, and during the post-war years, a Phantom airman was reported around the control tower and hangars, and a Phantom flyer, dressed in World War II flying gear, was seen many times around the dispersals at the end of runway 22. So the Ghost Flyer is not something new at Royal Air Force Linton-on-Ouse. Out of sight, out of mind. 2 weeks after Brenda Jenkinson saw the Phantom Airman, the Ghost reappeared, and Flight Lieutenant Mark Brine who was with Brenda, said, "I was with Brenda and she shouted to me. I saw this grey, shadowy figure that vanished into thin air." Royal Air Force Base haunted by Phantom Flyer, ran a headline in the Daily Mirror Wednesday, the 17th of August, 1988. And in the Star, haunted by ghost of runway 22, with subheading, "Mystery of RAF flyers return to bomber base, but had he ever left it?" The Daily Express ran a modest heading, "Control Tower Ghost Haunts Royal Air Force." Ghosts have been haunting the Royal Air Force since the days of the Montrose ghost, who was on the station's strength, and those posted to RAF Montrose received their arrival chits, a printed document welcoming them to the station and informing them that the camp was haunted by the youngest ghost in the Royal Air Force, an officer named Flight Lieutenant Arthur. So it had to be official. With the media in full cry, Squadron Leader Mike Brooks at RAF Linton-on-Ouse said, "At the time of the first sighting last summer, we moved a plaque donated by Hodgson's family from the outside to the inside of the tower. It was to his memory. Perhaps the moving of the plaque upset his spirit." And he added, "Brenda is so sure she saw the ghost that she has convinced many of us it is more than a possibility." Just making sure that's the no, just make sure that's a different voice. Sightings of a phantom figure have been reportedly seen several times around the control tower area, and with the moving of the plaque, it was assumed to be the ghost of Warrant Officer Walter Hodgson, whose ashes were scattered on runway 22 in 1959. Walter Hodgson, a flight engineer who came from Hull, flew from RAF Linton-on-Ouse, and he was a prisoner of war in Germany at Stalag Luft 3 after his Halifax bomber was shot down in 1942. The Daily Mirror on Friday the 19th of August 1988 had an article headline, "RAF Chiefs in Bid to Ground Ghost," with the subheading, "Widow Visits Old Airbase." That same day, The Sun headlines an article, Widow to ground ghost of RAF hero," with subheading, "Reunion at Haunted Control Tower." The Royal Air Force took the claim so seriously that Royal Air Force Support Command laid on a press conference to back Brenda Jenkinson. Then RAF chiefs ordered a special mission to ground the wandering ghost of war hero Warrant Officer Walter Hodgson. Walter's widow, Audrey Hodgson, and her family were invited to the old wartime bomber base for a bizarre reunion with the wandering spirit that had terrified many of the night duty staff. Mrs. Hodgson was convinced the ghost is that of her late husband and said, "I believe they're true because Walter had such a strong affinity with the camp." But the mystery remains unsolved. For after a visit to RAF Linton-on-Ouse by Mrs. Olive Johnson, the sister of Walter Hodgson, she made it very clear it could not be her brother, who was short, while the apparition is said to be about 6 feet tall. "He is definitely not around the station," she said. So if Walter Hodgson isn't haunting the airfield, who is? But the airfield was haunted long before Walter died. So what about all the other ghosts? This is ground control to Ghost Squadron. Are you receiving me? Come in, please. And we'll just read the caption here. We've got an illustration. Sergeant George Oliver, the tail gunner of Z Zebra, known to those who flew it as Zombie, pauses to admire his work of art. There we go. Now, I'm sure we've done that in one of our projects. So The Zombie was a Lancaster bomber of the Royal Canadian Air Force Bomber Group's Goose Squadron based at Linton-on-Ouse. On one operational trip, one of the Lancaster's mighty engines stopped dead and the crew had to land at an emergency aerodrome. Next morning, they went to the aircraft, started the engines, and they all functioned perfectly. Zombie means, they say, the living dead. This is ground control to Ghost Squadron. I think that definitely deserves a thunderclap. Oh, delicious. In the magnificent Rush beer glass. I should have added that earlier on. So part deux of tonight's beer is Love Lane Brewery Blackbird Extra Stout, 6.7%. Blackbird Extra Stout, brewed under the watchful eyes of the liver birds, roasted barley, flaked oats, and a selection of dark malts are combined to create a robust dark stout with notes of coffee, rich toffee, and chocolate, finished with a lingering tannic bitterness. Here I go. Brewed under the watchful eyes of the liver birds, roasted barley, flaked oats, and a selection of dark malts are combined to create a robust dark stout with notes of coffee, rich toffee, and chocolate, finished with a lingering tannic bitterness. A special release from Love Lane. Love Lane Brewery, 62 to 64 Bridgewater Street, that's Bridgewater with an E, Baltic Triangle, Liverpool, L10AY. See, our Bridgewater, oops daisy, only has one E, and that's the one at the end between the T and the R. So, right, half time. Oh, Derpy, what snack shall we open? I think we'll open the Thai chili rice snack. Because we is Gert starving tonight. Oh, these are absolutely delicious. There they are. Absolutely marvellous. So what have we been up to today? Oh, didn't realise I still had some wasabi mix I haven't finished off. Watering the plants. A little bit of admin for tonight's shows. And that was about it, really. I got to say, last night's BBC Prom, which was the Prog Rock Prom, oh my goodness me, that was awesome sauce. We had Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Genesis, yes, Focus, Peter Hamill, absolutely glorious stuff. I remember a few years ago thinking to myself that they really should do a prog rock prom. Well, blow me down, they did do one this year, so absolutely marvelous. So anyway, talking to prog rock, in the magnificent Rush beer glass, again courtesy of viewers Kirsten and Steve in the United States. God bless you. Oh, lovely. And also England last night trashing France 6-4. Goodness me. So what have we got? What have we got planned for this week, Dirk? I've got to do some admin tomorrow. I'm trying to think what else I got to do. Short-term memory problems. I know I've got to do something tomorrow, but I forgot what it was. But anyway, some admin. Get on with some work tomorrow, or that close to finishing off another project. I'm just trying to think what else we've got to do. But yeah, exciting times, because the alternative is being hooked up to a life support machine at Southmead, and no, winner Christmas dinner. So actually, I'm just going to get my pencil out. I'm just going to mark the stories we've just read, so that I can remember in future that we've done these ones. So what are we going to do tomorrow? I do have some garden stuff I want to get on with. I've got loads of flowers to plant, so might do that during lunch hour tomorrow. But beyond that, there is something I'm doing tomorrow. Just gone completely. Never mind. Right, let's crack on with part 2 of tonight's show. Oh, we've got a photograph here. A jet Provis prepares for takeoff at Linton-on-Ouse, the haunted control tower and hangars in the background. There's the photograph there. That's a jet Provis Mark III. I'm that tedious, folks. Oh my goodness me, this one goes on for... Do you know what? We might come back to that one. That is massively, it's about 8 pages long, and I'd like to go home tonight. So, right. Chapter 5, The Phantom Soldiers. The previous chapter has just dealt with flying saucers and the possibility of going back in time. Oh, the beer burps at 44 minutes and 8 seconds. There we go. But what about the future? Is it possible to break into the time zone and see into the future? Not to forecast the future, but actually see the future. In June 1812, 2 cattle herders did break into the time zone and glimpse the future. But to them, it was just a phantom army that they witnessed and could not explain the meaning of what they had seen. It was a beautiful, sunny Sunday morning in June 1812. And 2 cattle herders, Anthony Jackson, the beer burps again, and Martin Turner, were herding cattle in a field a few miles just south of Harrogate in Yorkshire, when suddenly, as if by magic, a vast army of heavily armed soldiers appeared. One minute they were alone with the cattle, the next they were surrounded by a phantom army. Without a sound, the soldiers, all dressed in white uniforms, except their leader, who stood out amongst them in his scarlet uniform, moved menacingly forward. As the phantom army moved nearer towards them, they carried out military infantry drill exercises with their muskets, all of which was carried out without any sound. It was an eerie spectacle, a ghostly spectacle that was being played out before their very eyes. Suddenly, the vast army halted, not more than 100 paces from where Anthony Jackson stood. In eerie silence, the phantom soldiers stood, their muskets at the ready. Jackson, a man in his early 50s, and Turner, a man in his late 20s, both felt compelled to turn and run, but they were unable to move, as if rooted to the ground. and they trembled with fear at such an awesome sight. But as the drama unfolded, their fear evaporated away. As they watched, the soldiers formed into a single column, 4 deep, and at the head of the huge column, Ua, the soldier in the scarlet uniform. All of this being carried out in complete silence and without any word or form of command. The thousands of soldiers stood as if waiting to march into battle, armed and at the ready. Then, without any command, the silent army turned to the left and, with the soldier in the scarlet uniform leading them, they quick marched to the top of a small hill and then halted. The huge column of phantom soldiers covered the hillside. They stood in silence. Throughout it all, Jackson and Turner stood transfixed. But there was more to come, for crossing the field to the right was another phantom army. These phantom soldiers wore dark blue uniforms and, like the other phantom army, moved without a sound, marching in strict military order. Thousands and thousands of soldiers converging on the white uniformed army of soldiers. The phantom army of blue uniformed soldiers was much larger than the first army, the leader of which remained on the top of the hill. The white uniformed army held fast on the hillside as the second army advanced towards them, nearer and nearer, until they marched right up the hill and into the first army. The two armies became locked together, the white uniforms and the dark blue uniformed soldiers at the top of the hill. Then, as if molded into one unit, the united armies wheeled to the right and marched down the hill. As they did so, a mist rolled across the fields towards them. As the silent phantom army neared the mist, it began to thicken and gradually engulfed the phantom soldiers. Within a few minutes, the dense mist started to thin, then vanished altogether, leaving no trace of the phantom soldiers that had marched into the mysterious mist and swallowed them up. Anthony Jackson and Martin Turner looked round them in complete bewilderment. They both stared at where the two great armies had been deployed. Everything was back to normal. The birds were singing again, green fields and clear blue sky. No signs at all of the silent phantom soldiers. Not a trace. I think that definitely deserves some of the Love Lane Brewery Blackbird in the magnificent Rush beer glass. We already called them out tonight, but thank you, Kirsten and Steve in the United States. Slange Bar. Oh, lovely. I think I'll have a bit more. Cheers. Had the two cattle herders glimpsed into the future that Sunday morning in June 1812? Afterwards, Jackson said, "As I watched the two armies, everything around me seemed still and quiet. No movement other than the two armies, which were completely noiseless. My vision was focused only on the soldiers, which were very clear, but all around me seemed blurred." To the two cattle herders, the whole phenomenon, to the two cattle herders, the whole phenomenon was an eerie, frightening experience. To be confronted by two phantom armies on a beautiful sunny Sunday morning was enough to unbalance the mind. They both said the combined armies covered an area of well over 40 acres. But Jackson and Turner did not seem afraid or unbalanced in any way. What they had witnessed left them frightened, but only frightened because they could not understand. They both said they felt no fear, even though there were thousands of soldiers. So, had they seen into the future? What had they witnessed? In the spring of 1812, Napoleon Bonaparte massed his Grand Army, about 453,000 men, including contingents from Prussia and Austria in Poland, to intimidate the Russian emperor. As the soldiers crossed the Niemen River, the Russians retreated, adopting a scorched earth policy. Napoleon engaged the Russian army at Borodino on the 7th of September 1812, and after savage and bloody fighting, entered Moscow a week later. But the Russians had abandoned the town, and the day Napoleon entered Moscow, a huge fire broke out, destroying most of the town. I think it's a bit charitable to call Moscow a town. Anyway, Napoleon was forced to withdraw, and the premature onset of winter made it disastrous. After a difficult crossing of the Berezina River in November, fewer than 10,000 men fit for combat remained with Napoleon's main force. The Prussian contingents deserted the Grand Army a few days later and turned against the French. The Austrians also withdrew their troops and adopted an increasingly hostile attitude against the French. The rot soon spread. Thus, in 1813, the forces arrayed against France were no longer armies of mercenaries. The Allies were gaining new troops every day, as one German contingent after another left Napoleon to go over to the other side. Was this what Anthony Jackson and Martin Turner had witnessed that sunny Sunday morning in June 1812? It is interesting to note that the counter-revolutionaries were termed the White Terror. Were they the White Army? Napoleon Bonaparte entered the French army in 1785 as an artillery officer. In 1804, he became Emperor of France. Thereafter, he won battle after historic battle, defeating the Austrians and Russians in battle defeating the Austrians and Russians in 1805, the Prussians in 1806, the Russians again in 1807, the Austrians again in 1809. The Russians again, albeit only narrowly, at Borodino in 1812. Then the disastrous retreat from Moscow. For nearly 20 years, Napoleon's armies fought across the length and breadth of Europe. So, had Jackson and Turner glimpsed into the future, or had the Phantom Army been a warning of some kind? The Reaper's bomber was such a warning of doom when it was seen over RAF Lisset in Yorkshire during the Second World War. The story of the Reaper's bomber is told in Ghost Stations. You could say the Phantom bomber was a glimpse into the future, for it came as a warning of doom. Over a century later, a grass field at Dunxwick, just south of Harrogate in Yorkshire, was used as a landing ground by B Flight of No. 33 Squadron Royal Flying Corps between March and October 1916. The site, which covered an area of some 40 acres, was also used by 76 Squadron during their patrols in this area. It was an excellent site, but for some unknown reason, it was never developed. Yet, at that period of the First World War, landing grounds were urgently needed. It was rumoured the site was haunted by a Phantom Army. At the time, a pilot of No. 33 Squadron said, "I was just turning into the wind when I saw them below, a whole army in white uniforms. I thought I turned away, and glancing back, there was nothing there, just a slight ground mist." By this time, 1916, the story of the Montrose ghost had spread through the Royal Flying Corps and was on everyone's lips. Captain Balfour, later Lord, heard the ghostly story in 1916. Montrose is haunted, was the cry, and it was obvious the Royal Flying Corps did not want another haunted airfield. One was too many. There have been many rumours which could be the reason why the site has never been developed and had no further aviation connection. Yet, just a few miles southwest, Yeadon, better known today as Leeds Bradford Airport, was opened in 1931. Had the Phantom Army had a hand in helping the Royal Flying Corps decide against developing Dunxwick into a wartime airfield? Just over a century earlier, the Phantom Army had marched across that very field, that bright, sunny Sunday morning in June 1812. And thunderclap. I think we've got a couple of nice short ones here. So, what do you know? Another dead soldier and run VT.
Oh, it's jolly nice of you. Hello, dead soldier. Seen plenty of those in my time.
Stands with on. Cheers with beers. This should be the last for tonight. Chapter 6, The Silent Sentinel. The Keeper of Memories is the key to many of the strange paranormal happenings, and the control tower is certainly the keeper of memories on all airfields. At Royal Air Force Topcliffe, the UFO was first sighted over the control tower. At Royal Air Force Linton on Ouse, it was the control tower which was again at the centre of the hauntings. Does the control tower hold the key to all the earthbound spirits? That is certainly the case at Royal Air Force Leconfield near Beverley in Yorkshire. During the period 1970 to 1976, John Brown was Senior Air Traffic Control Officer, SATCO, at Royal Air Force Leconfield, which was an operational fighter station. The squadrons based at Leconfield during that period were numbers 5 and 11, flying the supersonic Lightnings, the English Electric Lightnings. The station also housed a Lightning Jaguar and Phantom maintenance unit. And other than the jet fighters, Leconfield also had a 24-hour commitment to B flight of number 202 Squadron with helicopters. With the helicopter unit, it was always necessary to have a duty air traffic control officer, ATCO, available. Thus, the ATCO usually slept in the officer's mess on immediate call, should he be needed, and an assistant who slept in the air traffic control tower. Slange. Oh, lovely. You're good health. Oh. The air traffic control staff at RAF Leconfield were all civilians, but all ex-Royal Air Force, and held both civilian aviation authority licenses and Royal Air Force certificates. Most of the controllers were ex-Fighter Command. It was all rather unique, said John Brown. As Senior Air Traffic Control Officer, I was overall responsible to the station commander. I had retired from the Royal Air Force in 1970 as a flight lieutenant. I returned to Leconfield virtually immediately in a civil capacity. In early 1971, John Brown started to hear rumors that the assistants were becoming increasingly disturbed at spending the night alone in the control tower. Several had stated that on several occasions, several, footsteps had been heard in the visual control room, yet upon investigation, everything appeared normal, except for one night, as John Brown recalls. The assistant on duty that night was a young man of high intelligence and not given to imagination without due reason. He was certainly not neurotic. Sometime early in the morning on this particular day, around 0200 hours, he heard noises from the visual control room and crept up the stairs to investigate. It was a full moon, and the room was bathed in moonlight, and he stated that he saw, sitting at the control desk, an apparition with its back to the assistant and dressed as an RAF flight lieutenant. There was no materialization to the apparition. Needless to say, the assistant bolted to his room on the floor below and locked himself in. Sloan. Put it on Sunday night. I tuned in to watch Sunday Night Ghost Stories, but instead was treated to a confused man from Dudley eating wasabi snack mix. After his ghostly encounter, the assistant duly reported the incident to John Brown, the SATCO, and, upon investigation, he heard from the other assistants about previous eerie, haunting noises, although no one had actually seen anything. It also came to light that many other people had seen a mysterious airman in and around Number 1 hangar and the old wartime Nissen hut. Those who had witnessed the ghostly airman said they had a cold feeling as he moved around, as if he was looking for something or someone. But for one airman, it was much more frightening as he crossed near the old Nissen huts early one foggy February morning. I was just near the Nissen huts when a figure in front of me turned as if to ask me something, said the airman. I then saw he had an old wartime flying helmet, but no face. The young man who had seen the ghost airman in the visual control room was petrified at having to stay in the tower at night, and before long left to work elsewhere. The keeper of memories remained the silent sentinel. After further research, it came to light that a flight lieutenant air traffic controller had committed suicide on the station, although not in the control tower, and the young assistant who saw the ghost was unaware of that. So, was it the ghost of the flight lieutenant who had committed suicide and returned to haunt the control tower? And it is interesting to note that the keys for entry to the control tower were two sets only, one held by the duty controller and the other by the assistant. The control tower was securely locked. But what about the other ghostly figure? What about the other ghostly figure in the old flying helmet? The ghost with no face. It is said it could be the ghost of one of the crew of the Handley Page Halifax bomber MZ464, which crashed on the 25th of February 1945, killing all 6 crew when it hit high ground above Brantingham near Brough in Yorkshire during descent in bad visibility. The Halifax was being flight tested and was piloted by Flying Officer Max Hubbard, Royal Australian Air Force. His last words were with the control tower at RAF Leconfield, the silent sentinel. Definitely deserves a thunderclap. We're going to wrap this up tonight, folks. We've got a story to do. Sounds. Cheers, my beard. The Silent Few. Chapter 7, The Silent Few. Tangemere Museum can also claim a ghost or two, for there are many spooky goings-on at their excellent little museum. On a visit to this fascinating museum a year or so ago, I felt a distinct atmosphere about the place, said Nicholas Bell. Though the day was warm and the sunshine streamed into the halls, and he added, it felt oppressive and very chilly. And people working in the building have seen and heard many strange things. Tools have moved across the floor of their own accord, and an airman stands staring, then vanishes into thin air. The many exhibits on display at Tangemere Military Aviation Museum are from excavated crash sites, often bullet-riddled and mangled, which bore testimony to the violent and tragic events of the war. RAF Tangemere dates back to the First World War and all the beer burps again, do apologise. And at the start of the Second World War, it was a main target for the Luftwaffe bombers. During the Battle of Britain, Tangemere airfield was attacked and was almost unrecognisable during the war, during the Battle of Britain, Tangemere airfield was attacked and was almost recognisable after the Luftwaffe headed back for base, leaving behind a wrecked airfield and many dead, one being Pilot Officer William Fisk of No. 601 Squadron. His death meant he was the first American volunteer pilot to lose his life for Great Britain. Got to say, Bruce, yet again, terrible punctuation here. The Luftwaffe headed back to base, leaving behind a wrecked airfield and many dead, one being, Pilot Officer William Fisk of No. 601 Squadron. Doesn't need all those commas, Bruce. Anyway, slide. Oh, lovely. In the magnificent Rush United Federation Applied, in the magnificent United Federation Applied Shot Glass Rush. That's the Rush beer glass. You can tell I've had a drink or two. In the magnificent United Federation Applied Shot Glass, again courtesy of friends of Kirsten and Steve, United States, Slange. I think we'll have a few more wasabi mix. Right. During the war years, Royal Air Force Tangier housed many famous fighter squadrons and, with being a main airfield close to the coast, received many battle-damaged aircraft which quite literally belly landed on the runway. A battle-damaged Handley Page Halifax bomber whose luck held as it struggled back over the English Channel, only to run out after crash landing at Tangier. The crippled bomber crashed into a hangar, killing all the crew. Death and destruction was a daily diet for those serving at RAF Tangier. Then the dawn of a new day as the war ended. Peace at long last, but not for many restless spirits which haunt the old fighter airfield. The memory of these turbulent but happy days are kept alive by the Tangier Aerodrome Memorial Museum, which finally became airborne in 1982. In 1984, the museum closed for renovations, but the renovations also disturbed the spirits from the past, for many of the workmen reported hearing footsteps. Yet there was no one there, and a figure of a man in RAF uniform would suddenly appear, staring, always staring, then vanish. In April 1985, goodness me, April 1985, I was 18. Here we go. In April 1985, Mr. Denning and two friends spent an evening in the museum building with tape recorders and other equipment. Though the atmosphere was certainly very eerie, we drew a blank, he said, apart from a strange cold sensation up the legs on 2 occasions. Mr. Deaning saw nothing unusual at the Tangier Museum, but what happened afterwards was very eerie, as he recalls. After I got home to Southampton from Tangier, I was conscious later that night and through the next day of a strange, sad feeling, as though I had brought some influence or other away with me. Difficult to put into words, but I felt as if someone needed help and that we ought to go back there sometime, possibly with a reliable medium, as was done in the famous Bertram Newton case. Alas, since retiring in October 1985 and moving up to Brandon to live, I have not managed to revisit Tangier, but I have not forgotten it by any means. Many volunteer workers at the museum have also claimed to have seen an airman always staring, as if in fear, then suddenly disappears. Because of the sudden appearance of the ghost airman, many volunteers will not work on their own. One volunteer worker went into an annex which was being used as a kitchen to brew up some tea and heard someone walking about in the hall outside. He was expecting another man to arrive, but at the time was alone in the building, or so he thought. He called out to his friend, "I'm in the kitchen," at the same time looking round to see a figure in RAF uniform pass the open doorway. His friend arrived some 10 minutes later, and though they searched the building, no one was found. The reason for the ghost airman staring as if in fear could be the fear of being burnt in the aircraft. Many were killed in the air, burnt alive as their fighter plunged to earth in a ball of fire. Is it the ghost of Pilot Officer Fisk, who was pulled from his burning Hurricane fighter, only to die in hospital the next day, unable to speak, only staring into space? The Tangier Museum is well worth visiting if you are ever in the area. And if you need to be fortified first, make a call into the Barda Arms public house, which is near Tangier. and as many interesting bits and pieces on the walls. Then drink in the atmosphere at the museum. You will be welcome, and if the occasion is right, you will certainly feel those silent few sweep by. Bum, bum, bum. No, we'll save that one for the next time, which will be Wednesday. That's it. Goodness me. Oh, let's finish the beers off. Sounds me well. Delicious. It's nice. Delicious. That's it for tonight. Fingers crossed. We'll be back on Wednesday for Sunday Night Ghost Stories Extra. It does make sense, trust me. With more ghost stories and alcohol-fueled nonsense. So, until then, it behoves me to say thank you for watching. Why not? What else are you going to do on a Sunday than watch a confused man from Dudley with holes in his head, drink ghost stories, and read alcohol? Come on, there's a World Cup final on, for goodness sake. So we're not in it, but we did win third place last night. So awesome sauce. So anyway, until the next time, it behoves me to say thank you for watching. Why not? Stay safe, stay out of trouble, and please don't have nightmares. Good night.